As I understand it, Mark Frost and David Lynch would meet once a year for dinner. And for many years, Mark Frost would bring up the idea of revisiting Twin Peaks for a third season, and David Lynch would turn the idea down flat. And one time, Mark Frost mentioned, hey, here in the next few years, it's going to be the 25th anniversary. I think this would have been in 2016. And this conversation was happening a year or two before. And he said, Lynch was like, yeah. And he said, you know, Agent Cooper and Laura Palmer met in the Black Lodge 25 years later. And he said, Lynch got this look on his face, like, yeah. And that sold him on doing a third season. Really interesting little story. Well, I say that because as I'm watching season 1, I am convinced that they, at the very least, studied season 1 to inform what season 3 would be like. And it's possible that a good portion of characters and maybe even a good portion of season 2 were just basically retconned out. I could be wrong about that. There's just a lot of things about season 2 that isn't quite there. I mean, there's some things with season 2 that are there, though. Detective Bryson, is that his name, I think? Played by David Duchovny, is in season 3. So, but it's just, there's a lot of story elements that I'm just like, it seemed to fit very well with season 1, but I can't find it with season 2. Maybe you can make a case for some things with Major Briggs. I'm not sure. And of course, in how season 2 ended. But a lot of things about season 2 I feel are missing. Anyway, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I just thought I'd mention that. And the whole idea, again, of this series that I'm doing is just try to, again, talk about things that maybe haven't been discussed by the community very much. So give just a fresh take on some things. Also, as some time has passed now, it's been about 5 years since season 3 finished, you know, and everybody has sort of calmed down and backed off a little bit. It's kind of when I like to get in there and think about things. I don't know why. I've always been this way. A little bit late to the party usually. Now, this episode was a doozy in terms of how to understand what was going on. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did for the pilot. I'm going to talk about what I believe they were trying to accomplish back then versus how they saw it in light of season 3. So let's go back to the pilot. Okay, this is pretty, I think if you like Twin Peaks, you probably will like this because I think it's fascinating. I haven't been able to quit thinking about it. If you go back to the pilot, you have to ask the question, what were they trying to accomplish? They didn't really know whether they were going to have a TV series. In fact, there's an ending, an alternate ending for European audiences. Because in order to sell it in Europe, the pilot as a movie, it needed an ending. And so that ending ended up informing season 1 of a few elements, which I believe episode 2 will get into. So you have to ask, what were they trying to accomplish? You know, if you've been watching Twin Peaks as long as I have, there's some elements that are probably missing on you. You haven't thought about because you don't remember the first time you saw it. I know I don't. But there's an effort to create tension that's not there after you know what all happens, but was there probably the first time you saw it. So it tells you about scenes. This is so interesting. It tells you about scenes and what the purpose of the scene was. For example, what was the original purpose of Teresa Banks? If you don't know, Teresa Banks was someone mentioned. So Agent Cooper has this is again in the pilot, not episode 1, has a public forum where he mentions that there was someone nearby who was killed in the same manner. Her name was Teresa Banks. They had found a letter under her fingernail, and same thing as Laura Palmer. And he said, I believe that this killer may even be someone you know. And he institutes a curfew. So it's really interesting. What are they trying to do with this scene? Are they trying to make sure you know about Teresa Banks? Because the concept of the movie wasn't there at all, right? So what were they trying to do? All of that exists for one reason: to create tension going into the final act. And what was that tension? Well, Agent Cooper ends by saying, I would remind you that these crimes happened at night. And then you see the light changing, right? The stoplight changing from yellow to red. And a lot of times people were like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, I think it was just a cut, originally just a cut to show you it was night, right? To show you, uh-oh, you know, definitely don't want to go out now, it's night. Another thing they had established at this point, I am getting into episode 1 here. Another thing they had established at this point is that whoever the FBI or whoever Agent Cooper and Harry S. Truman suspect is the murderer is someone the audience ought to really be concerned with. But what if someone they don't suspect is the murderer might be the murderer? Well, now nobody can protect anyone from that person. What do I mean? They go to the train car and they see on a mound of dirt a writing that says, "Fire walk with me." And then on top of that little mound of dirt is half a heart. They look at the half a heart and they say, whoever has the other half of this heart could be our suspect. Why is that there? Well, it's David Lynch's unique storytelling style where he masks exposition with images and side conversations and everything but looking at the camera and explaining everything. So the audience knows, yeah, whoever has the other half of that heart must be somehow involved in some way. And so all of it is setting you up for that final act when someone breaks the curfew. And who is it that breaks the curfew? It's Donna, right? Donna breaks the curfew and she goes out and she meets James in the middle of the woods. And what you're supposed to do as an audience member is see that and go, Donna, you are risking your life. Like, you are foolish. You could die tonight. She's out in the woods just like Laura was. Her life is going in that direction. Now, in episode 1, they doubled down on this. They really doubled down on this. They go hard at the idea that Donna is the next victim, or potentially the next victim. How do I know this? Well, all right, this is where we get into understanding what they were trying to accomplish in season 1 versus what they were trying to accomplish. How should we see season 1, episode 1 in light of season 3? All right, so season 1, episode 1, a lot of introductory things are happening. And one of the things we learn about Donna is that she was told she didn't have to go down. It was Saturday morning, does not have to go to the police station. They said, just let her rest. And she explains to her mom that her and James are in love. And this sort of would deflate the tension. But then she goes to Mrs. Palmer to visit her. And this has got a lot of dialogue you'd be very familiar with if you've seen the show. Mrs. Palmer says, I miss her so much. Do you miss her? And Donna says, I miss her. I miss her so much. And Mrs. Palmer says, I miss her so much. And then she looks, and on Donna's face, superimposed over Donna's face, is Laura's face. This is, by the way, if you've watched or like Lost Highway by David Lynch, that inspires some scenes in Lost Highway. And there will be other scenes in season 1 that inspire Lost Highway. I think the very last episode, something happens that absolutely it inspired all of Lost Highway. I know for a pretty good intel that inspired it, but we'll get to it when we get to it. So she sees Laura's face and freaks out, and then sees Bob. Okay, So what's happening here when it was originally done? Well, I think what's going on here is Sarah Palmer is able to perceive something that not every character can perceive. Agent Cooper can perceive it, Sarah Palmer can perceive it, but not everyone else can. And what is that thing? Well, that thing is the third world. I talked about this in the previous video, that in Twin Peaks, there are apparently 3 worlds. The first world, to keep this brief, is just the common world of cherry pies and coffee and hospitals and, you know, Donna and James falling in love and the bookhouse, you know, not the bookhouse itself and all that. The second world is the world, the seedy underbelly, the sort of the mysterious, the world that Sheriff Truman has to kind of figure out what's going on, and Agent Cooper as well. And that is, you know, the Bookhouse Boys, the secret society, everybody has secrets. Everybody has, there's just a world, what's going on with the mill, right? There's sort of secrets about what's the real ledger versus the fake ledger, and the double crossing and all that in the background, and the drugs being coming across the border, and One-Eyed Jacks. And then the third world is the spiritual world, and Mrs. Palmer is in. She can see the third world. That's the world of Bob and the Black Lodge. She can see the third world, and she can see the first world. I don't know that she has much to do with the second world. Sheriff Truman has no concept of the third world. He acknowledges it, which we'll get to that when it happens. He mentions it, but keeps it nebulous. He doesn't understand it and is not concerned with it. He's concerned with the second world. And of course, Cooper is the dreamer, and his dream links all of these things. And the reason why that is, I don't want to talk about it too much. We'll get to it. I think that'll happen in this next episode, where David Lynch directs the next episode, where we see that Cooper is linked now to the third world, second world, and first world. So, all right, I said that. So, what does that mean? In this episode, when she sees Laura's face over Donna's, she's perceiving this third world, right? She's perceiving that Donna is Laura. And for Sarah, it causes her to freak out because she loves her daughter and misses her and sees Laura. But for the audience, the intention, it appears from Lynch and Frost, is Donna is in trouble. Donna is a potential victim, just like Laura. Again, it's Lynch's unique style of telling a story. And you might hear that and go, I don't know, that may be a stretch. It's not. And we know this because of season 3. So I posted on Facebook something that got a little bit of traction back in 2017 in some of the Twin Peaks communities. And I was partially right in the post, and I was partially wrong. I was wrong in my conclusion, but I was right in what was being hinted at and pointed to. So it's a scene, probably my favorite scene in all of season 3, and my favorite episode, I think, is episode 17. No, not 17. Maybe it was like 14 or 15. Anyway, a lot happens in this episode. And Gordon Cole is sitting in his hotel room. Here's a knock at the door. Walks over to the door, opens it, and sees Laura crying. And all of a sudden, she's gone, and Albert Rosenfield is there. And it just came to me. I was like, oh, wow. Something's going on with Albert. And I went back to episode 2, I think. And if you've seen season 3, you'll recall this. The screen is blue, and everything's just saturated in blue. And Albert and Gordon are having a talk, and Gordon is like very concerned that Albert has done something wrong. Like he's hiding something from Cole. And this might have been a deliberate misdirection. It made me think, oh wow, Albert might be a bad guy. and I posted all the details that I'm leaving out most for right now, and put there's a lot of details of why it seemed to point to Albert as the bad guy. And that was incorrect. It might have been a misdirection, a red herring. What it really was is that Albert, his life was in danger. And Laura was showing Cole that his life was in danger. And sure enough, Cole looks at him a little bit later and goes, "I'm worried about you, Albert." And then a doppelganger attempts to murder Albert. She was put in place. And in fact, it was Diane's doppelganger that was put in place to kill Albert. Interesting. Well, when you go back to this episode 1 of season 1, in light of season 3, what it's saying here is that Donna's in trouble. So both in light of season 1 and in light of season 3, Donna's a potential target at this point. Now, the only thing here that might be retconned is one thing. And that is, and it's very subtle if it is originally what was intended is that Sarah could see things other people couldn't see. Because even the Black Lodge wasn't a concept at this time. It appears Sarah can see things other people can't see. But in light of season 3, one can make the argument that it's actually Laura trying to warn Sarah. Because Laura is part of this spiritual battle that's taking place. She was put into Twin Peaks to combat Bob. And so it wasn't that Laura was just a victim, but rather Laura was part of a broader story in the third world. And so it was actually possibly Laura that did this. Unfortunately, Donna is just almost entirely written out of season 3. I mean, she is, right? I think she's completely written out of season 3. So, but, you know, I do think they're using things they're seeing in season 1 to inform them how to guide season 3, and not many things from season 2 as far as I can tell. Anyway, I thought that was really interesting. Could be off on some of it, but I think it's pretty accurate. And I'm going to get on watching the next episode, even having seen these so many times. I will say, as much as I love season 1, none of it's as good as the pilot. They just never arrive at that level of storytelling. But season 1 is still one of the best small series of television events I've ever seen. All right, have a good one.